Hey everyone, welcome to my shop. My name is Paul. I live outside Chattanooga, Tennessee. My YouTube channel and my workshop, I call them Hillbilly Chic. And it's been a while since I've done a workshop tour, and I've a lot of changes since the last one I did, so let's get to it. My shop is 30 feet wide and 50 feet long. I have it set up into a few different areas. On the one side, I have all my tools going to the back wall, where I do have my dust collection and all the tools that require the dust collection. And then on the other side, I have a lot of lumber storage because I do sell lumber. I have a sawmill that I use quite a bit, make videos of, and I also have a solar kiln, which I do videos of occasionally. And any lumber that goes through the solar kiln comes into the shop, and I try, if I'm not going to use it, I will try and sell it. I have power along the one wall, nothing on the other wall, and my tables, on my outfeed table is wired up for power. A couple things I do really like is I do have a couple of extension cords on reels, and I have one here towards the front, which easily makes outside, and one closer to my outfeed table. I also have shop air, one here at the front, and also one at my outfeed table on a reel above the table. Right as you come into my shop, I have my welding table. I've got a TIG machine and a MIG machine. I won't get into the specifics there, but I can do up to a half-inch material. I don't do much fabrication. I really like industrial-looking stuff, so I quite often would do metal legs, but I'm concentrating on becoming a better woodworker, and so I'm doing a lot of wood legs these days. So not much welding going on at the moment, and this table mainly gets used as a drying rack right now. Unfortunately, I do not have cooling in my shop, which is a bit of an issue in the summer. But in the winter, I do have heating. I have underfloor heating. My slab is poured on 2-inch sheets of polystyrene, and I have 5 runs of PEX, and that PEX tubing is stapled to that polystyrene sheeting, and I run water through tankless hot water heater, goes through that little thing there which takes the air out, into a pump, then into the floor, back out of the floor, and back into the heater. It has no problem keeping up with the coldest days around here, but the key is not really in the heating system. It's in the insulation, and the entire shop is sprayed foam insulation. Next up on this side of the shop, I've got my tool wall workbench. I've got a post drill and a Foley 61 sharpener for hand saws. I don't really need it. I just wanted it. It was too good a deal to pass up. My workbench, now this is one of my first regrets. I don't regret making this bench. I regret it taking me so long to do it. I started it, I got the plans, and I started making parts, and some of them sat around for 10 years before I finished it off because it is a pretty big project. I would have been a lot further along in my hand tool stuff had I just made a cheap and dirty bench and mounted an end vise and a leg vise to it. My tool wall is still fairly new. I still have a little bit of empty real estate there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with, but I have a couple of hand drills, and I have a dedicated countersink in one of them, and I find that very handy. Some traditional saws, Japanese saws, some jack planes, a low-angle jack plane for shooting boards. I'm starting to make more of those. Scrapers, I have a number 7 joiner plane, which I really ever use for flattening my worktop on my workbench. Got my layout tools there, some block planes, finishing planes, and some chisels. And then down below that, I've got some cleats. And I just make these little boxes, which is a good opportunity to practice my dovetails and just chuck different items in there. But the last thing on this wall is my miter saw station. This is fairly new. I just finished these cabinets with my last video or big project. And I can truly say I very much disliked every minute of it. I don't like making cabinets. I have the Bosch chop saw or miter saw, mainly so I could go right up against the wall with it. There's no bars. It's got that little funky mechanism. And I don't have a fence because mainly I use the chop saw for just breaking down materials. But I do have a little stop block there. And I did put in some perpendicular T-track just in case I want to add a backstop in the future. I didn't want to run my shop's dust collection system all the way over here, so I just have a point of use shop vac hooked up to the chop saw's dust collection system. And I did put the aftermarket Shop Nation attachment on there, which seems to do a better job of collecting dust from it. And with that being said, here's a clip from a video I'm doing at the same time. This is just one cut of Jatoba wood. And look at all the fine dust that gets created from one cut. A little disappointing, but there's more work to do. These cabinets have added a lot of storage, which I really needed. The larger drawers are great. The smaller ones are just a little bit too small, I think. I have found a few items which just don't fit, which I wanted to go in the smaller drawers and not the bigger ones. I have 3 inches of clearance from the bottom of the drawer to the frame of the cabinet. Partially self-inflicted because I did put 1/2 inch material in there because I wanted a stiffer, the drawer bottoms to be a bit more stiffer than the 1/4 inch. So I lost a 1/4 inch, but still I found that it would have been nice if they were just a little bit deeper in some instances. Above and behind the miter saw station, I do have a cleat and a couple of holders here. A lot of these tools got moved over to the tool wall, so I'll make some new ones of these later. And a bit of pegboard, which just catches odds and ends. I've got a cyclone dust collector in the back corner with 6-inch ducting that goes along the back wall, except for one branch that goes up to the ceiling and catches my CNC. I have an 18-inch bandsaw. I had a nice Grizzly, which had really good dust collecting, but a little bit smaller. I upgraded to this, thinking I'd do resawing, and I never do resawing, and the dust collection is terrible on that. Let's put that down as another regret. I'll run things through the joiner, and then over to the planer, and so both sides are done, and then I can decide which side is the best to run through the joiner to do the edge. And then depending on the project, I will run them through the drum sander, then over here to my table saw to cut them to the final dimension. The outfeed table for my table saw is a full 4x8 feet, so it also makes it very handy for doing assembly and accumulating clutter. It's covered in Formica, and it's quite a durable material, so glue won't stick to it. So I do have a couple of work surfaces here, and I did cover them all with Formica. If something is too big for my CNC to flatten, I do have a very crude flattening jig. It's just 2 pieces of angle iron, and the trolley that goes between, I have a plunge router that sits in there, and the wheels have grooves in them that ride along the angle iron. I have a small Laguna lathe for doing knobs and stuff like that, handles. Still quite new to me, still afraid of it. And then I have a Powermatic 2x4 foot CNC. I really don't do any batching out of parts and stuff like that, so I don't really get that much use out of it. My friends get more use out of it than I do. And of course, I mentioned before, I have 6-inch ducting going everywhere, which everywhere gets reduced to 4 inches to go to individual machines, and that catches the CNC and the lathe. These are my goats, Bert and Ernie. Bert's the one in the back. They like to make an appearance in the afternoons. This was a great little clip, but I forgot to turn my microphone on. Every day is like the first day. This wall is pretty much just set up for lumber storage. And I also keep equipment here that's on wheels that I can either put it in front of the door or the big roll-up door and set up a fan or dust collection. And I have my sharpening station here. I used to be on the Japanese water stones, but I've gone to the sandpaper method. And they're just mounted on a cabinet with which was a sink cutout. And I've gotten much better results with sandpaper than I ever did with the water stones. Table router, drill press, spindle sander, disc sander, and again, those are all on wheels and I can move them wherever I want. I also have an industrial sewing machine for doing leather and canvas. It's another hobby that quite hasn't taken off just yet for me, but I enjoy doing it and tinkering around with it. Here's the main wood storage. Last summer, I made a deal with a retiring cabinet maker to buy a whole bunch of hardwood and plywood. And he gave me such a good deal that me and my couple of buddies that went in on it went down and helped him clean up the day after. And he needed to get rid of these racks, and he also gave me the racks. So I had to cut them off the floor. They sat outside for a long time, and then I had to modify them because they were along a wall. But I made them back to back. They're tied into the trusses above, so they're not going to tip over. I made a space in the middle on this upper part there. I keep lots of scrap or odds and ends, and then sheet goods. And then I also have wood divvied up by species and what I'm trying to sell. Lots of walnut, white oak, jatoba, or Brazilian cherry. Big slabs on the bottom of walnut, pecan. But yeah, so I'm trying to move a lot of the wood that's on the walls over to here. That brings us to the front of the shop where I have my air compressor. I have a couple outlets for that, one over my assembly table or my outfeed table, and one here by the front door. It's sized kind of in the middle. It's too big. Well, it's overkill for doing air nailers, but too small to do like an air sander or something like that. But it runs die grinders that I use for welding pretty well. And then a workbench here that I use for charging and keeping all my camera gear. I got my old antique barber chair here. And when I'm telling my wife I'm down here cleaning up, I'm usually sitting in this chair, doom scrolling through TikTok and drinking a beer. But that's my shop tour. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe if you have any questions. We'll see you next time.